He is the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. He's John Lynch. How are you, John?
I'm doing great, Rich. How you doing?
Have you ever been asked to be in a movie, in a sports movie, or play yourself? Have you ever gotten that offer, John?
I wasn't in a sports movie. There was a group of us. It was a John Travolta. As you were saying, all those guys, I was trying to remember. That's how great of a movie it was. It was in Tampa. John Travolta. We were all extras. We made what do they call that? The outtakes or whatever. That's as far as it went. But
was this during
I don't even remember the damn name of the movie, so I'm sorry.
Was this during your baseball days, John? Is that what you're talking about?
No, this is when I was playing for the Bucks. And
okay. So you and Brooks
Simeon Rice was in it, and Brooks. And
you got to look that up, Chris. Look that up.
Yeah, we got to look that up.
I don't know if you got credit.
The Punisher,
if you just,
that's it.
The Punisher. The Punisher.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that could have been your nickname while you were playing, John. Right?
That's right.
So actually, let me start with that one first, John. Since you're obviously locked in on everything going on in the NFL as a former player and a general manager, this rule that got passed late in the owners' meeting, and now there's going to be a couple more days to try and put more meat on the bones here with the membership meeting again, about lowering your helmet and initiating contact and that being a foul right away. And that could include running back trying to score, could include offensive lineman trying to block, could include quarterback trying to sneak. I mean, what can you tell fans or anybody about this rule? Your thoughts on it, John?
Well, I can tell you that, I was in that room. It was the head coaches, general managers, and owners all in there, along with the competition committee and, of course, Commissioner Goodell. And it was a spirited discussion, a long discussion, a passionate discussion on both sides. And really, there's not sides because everybody wants this game to be safer. But how you implement something like this, it sounds great, but how do you actually go about and do it? And I think that's one thing. I know they're meeting here the next couple days, and they've made great progress in terms of defining the rule. But they kind of agreed that there should be a rule, but it's still. I think they're still figuring out exactly how to implement it. I know that the sentiment was we want to have a better version of what's been happening in college. The one thing I did stand up and say, during that meeting is, college football, while safety obviously is the absolute paramount motivation of everybody, college football for me became somewhat unwatchable last year with the targeting rule. And a game gets going, you stop it for 15 minutes to look at every angle. Did some part of his head? I think it should be for the egregious ones, and I think. As a player, you always knew when somebody was out of line in terms of the way they were playing the game. And, I think as we continue to learn things, yes, we have to address this. But we have to also know that we play a physical sport, and that's part of the allure of it, and people sign up knowing that. And so it's a touchy issue. I don't think anyone has the perfect answer, but we're all striving to try to find how we can best do that.
Now, obviously, player safety is paramount, John. We all know it, and I agree with you. My concern is we finally fixed the catch rule, okay? Yeah. Where fans know if the ultimate concept of 15 men and women are in a bar and a catch looks like a catch. If everybody thinks it's a catch, it should be a catch. I think we finally achieved that. Now, if we're going to start saying a hit might not be a hit, like what's a hit? Can a hit survive the intent? That's that's a slippery slope to go down. And I was chatting on the air live with the commissioner prior to the draft and mentioned how Richard Sherman thinks this is going to lead to more lower extremity injuries, and he bristled. But you're a former defensive back. I mean, don't you think this is going to limit the ability of a defensive back to know where to target and what to hit here?
I've had those concerns. I do think that players evolve, and I think the good thing is we've seen players adjust their play. And they feel like it needs to go a step further. I just think you better walk a careful line in terms of, not taking the football out of football, so to speak. I think, Rich, what I believe is that the most important steps, as I now get to see it, and this was kind of quiet with the rule out there. The Players Association and the NFL came together and they've eliminated certain helmets. They now have research, and for years that was my deal. You can talk about taking the head out of the game and all that, but your head is attached to your body, and people are moving very fast. And so I think the emphasis on that has been great. I think much more important and worthwhile has been the emphasis on the technology. When you pump money and resources into the technology, from the time I played when I was 8 years old to the time I stopped playing when I was 37, the helmets didn't change at all. And now you're starting to see this new line of helmets that they've really put a lot of thought and science and resources into. I think that's going to make it a much safer game. The rules as well, and I commend everyone for wanting to find an answer. I just think, like you said, is like how do you find that perfect answer? Are there going to be some growing pains? I know there will be.
John Lynch, general manager of the 49ers, here on the Rich Eisen Show. As for the draft, with the Raiders looking for an offensive lineman just like you, and you draft Mike McGlinchey, would you not agree that coin flip at the Combine was for Mike McGlinchey, essentially?
I know you're a big fan of Rod Woodson's, and so am I.
He was part of that coin toss.
Yeah, he was. He flipped it, and so he's got a job for life. But that was important. Last year in my first draft, we saw going from pick number 2 to pick number 3 with the trade for the Bears, which I think is going to work out great for both franchises. But it's a big deal, particularly when you're picking in the top 10. I don't know where the Raiders were going after us, but I do know that we had settled on Mike McGlinchey being our guy, and we were sure thrilled to have the opportunity to add him to what we're doing here in San Francisco.
And what you're doing there in San Francisco has got a lot of people excited, John. I don't need to tell you, there's a certain location where the Raiders are moving to eventually that believes that this is a 9-win team at the very least. How do you tamp expectations?
I know what we're doing right now. I'm looking out at our players on the field working out, and they're working really hard. And I think that's been the message is, yes, we did close last year extremely well. But we got to start anew, and we got to start all over again in terms of forming this team's identity. I do know we've improved our team, both through free agency, through the draft, through undrafted free agency. We're going to be a better, more competitive bunch in terms of the pieces that we have, both in depth and cornerstone game-changing players. And so that's a great thing. I think we're more explosive. We're more dynamic. Jimmy's going to have a full off season under his belt of really understanding the offense as opposed to just being able to function for a game, which he did very well. And so I think there's a lot of things that have us excited, but it has not been lost on Coach Shanahan. He's done a tremendous job with the messaging to these guys that we have to start all over, and the work that we do and how we go about our work, we call it deliberate practice. If we can attack this thing in a deliberate way, we'll get better each day and give ourselves a great opportunity to really take that momentum we had from last year into this season.
John Lynch here on the Rich Eisen Show. What is the status of Reuben Foster, John?
Well, he's going through these legal proceedings right now, and so as a result of that, there's not a whole lot I can say. We have been strong in what we have said about that situation, and it's right now it's one that we have to sit back and let the legal process play itself out. And there's been new developments and all that, and I'll leave that to everybody to interpret to themselves. But he's not here at our off-season workouts with our team. We felt that with the seriousness of the charges that have been levied against him, that it was best to have Reuben train on his own right now. But we eagerly await the developments as this case proceeds or whatever happens in the case, and so that's where we are with him.
Have you contacted him? Are you in contact with him at all, John?
We have been in contact, and Reuben's still a part of this team, even though he's not working out with us, and I think you get we're not supposed to as a team investigate these things, but you do gather some level of information, and I think we've taken the appropriate action for the information we have right now, and we'll continue to do that.
One guy I mentioned on the show yesterday that nobody's talking about free agency is Jerick McKinnon and what he can do in Shanahan's system. We've seen what he can do with running backs every single place he has been to. And I'm wondering how you could tell folks, other than just Jimmy G winning, what this offense is going to look like this fall. Best you can tell me on the 1st of May, John.
Well, I think it's going to be pretty dynamic. I think we get Pierre Garçon back. Marquise Goodwin, we re-signed and extended him out, and he really came out and flourished. Before, he had just been a speed guy, but he showed he could be more than that. Pierre was playing great football before he got hurt. You throw Jerick McKinnon in there, you throw Kyle Juszczyk, who we really figured out how to use. And I think what we have, Trent Taylor in the slot. Now Dante Pettis is a guy who we're extremely high on as a receiver, as a punt returner. Mike McGlinchey's thrown in there. We get guys back who were injured last year. I just think there's a lot of explosive players, and one thing Kyle does tremendously well, I think he puts guys in positions and defenders in positions where they have tough matchup problems. I think McKinnon's another guy who can provide matchup problems for opposing defenses, and when we have those guys all over the field, it's going to be tough to deal with, and so we're excited about that. And I think the cool thing about Jerick, even though he's a smaller guy and a fast guy, he plays big. We had some level of concern when you first start looking at him because we let Carlos Hyde walk in free agency. But we kind of had a cool thing with Carlos being the bigger back and Matt Breida and other guys being that smaller guy. And Jerick, although small in stature, he plays big. He's a big, he plays like a bigger back, and so we think he can kind of be an every down back as well. So we're excited about him.
So if Jimmy G wasn't on your team, John, would you be, after Tom Brady said he's pleading the fifth on whether he's appreciated in New England, would you be calling up Bill and trying to shoot the moon one more time?
I'm just glad we have Jimmy G. I'm glad that thing worked itself out. Yes. I sure was glad as this draft was going on, as this whole process, that we in our minds have our answer there. It wasn't a bad year to be needing a quarterback because both in free agency and in the draft there were a lot of options, more so than typical, but we were sure pleased to have Jimmy not only have made that trade, but then locked him up long term. He's a part of us, and we're thrilled about that.
And last one for you, have you noticed what people are supposing that he's a free agent draw, that you have more interest in your team because of him?
No doubt about it. Last year, you talk about having to sell people. There was one point when we landed Pierre Garçon and Marquise Goodwin, and we didn't have a quarterback. And that's a difficult conversation. Just trust us, guys. We're going to get you a guy. And fortunately, they listened and they believed in us. And fortunately, things fell our way with Jimmy, and we were able to land a guy. It is becoming a destination, and the way to continue to make that a destination is win football games, and that's what we're working really hard to try to accomplish this season.
Great chat, John. Always love catching up with you. Let's chat again real soon. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Rich. Okay.
You got it. That's John Lynch at John Lynch 49.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.